Welcome to the Rethreading Lives podcast, where we talk about how to take your threads of harm and through the rethreaded process, transform them into something that actually helps you reach your potential. We'll talk with different leaders in our city and our country and find out what they're doing. You'll walk away from listening to this podcast with useful insights and captivating stories on how you yourself can rethread your life and your business. I'm Kristen Keene, and this is the Rethreading Lives podcast. Hello, Rethreading Lives listeners. Today I get to recap, honestly, one of my most favorite episodes that we've done on Rethreading Lives. Megan Hayward, who is a young entrepreneur who's been through hell and back, and she is so smart. The way that she has navigated her trauma is incredible. And she had so many mic drop moments that I just wanted to write them down, all of them. You can hear, like, if you listen to the whole episode, you'll just see me get so excited and so inspired by what she shares. So I just want to do a little recap with you, watch some highlights, have a little discussion. So let's listen to Megan.
My subconscious, of course, keeps track of everything. But I want to say I was raped 96 times from July to December when I found out I was pregnant. And, when you look back on it, you can say God was there through that. I think that's talking about how good of a God we serve. And it's not black and white with him. He can see the way through the chaos and still cover us with his love, even when it feels like we don't feel it at that time. Like I said, I was pregnant and I never thought about having an abortion. It didn't even cross my mind. And it's not because I'm some amazing person. I think it was a blessing it didn't cross my mind, because I can't promise you, even growing up as Christian as I did, that it wouldn't have happened. I'm the exception that everybody talks about for abortion. And, I decided to keep him, and I was going to put him up for adoption. And actually did put him up for adoption, but the guy came back and tried to get custody during that adoption process. So it ended up being a 2-year custody battle over my son. And after 2 years, I won. He's not allowed to see my son at all. And I don't have to deal with him at any level. My son's never met him. And my son will be 16 later this year. But what an amazing God I serve to come out of this. And you couldn't have told me this 15 years ago, 16 years ago, that this was a blessing or this would have turned out well.
At that point, what did 15 or 16 years ago, you're pregnant, you had a baby. When did your parents find out everything?
The day after I found out I was pregnant, the guy texted my parents and told them I was pregnant. Yeah. Thinking that I don't exactly know what he was thinking.
I just want to go back to the first part of this, where she talks about how she's going through this hell, right? Raped 97 times. You have to listen to the whole podcast, but to come to a place in your healing. I mean, she was just talking about how she almost surprised herself, where she can trust that God was in the darkness, that God was with her in the darkness. And this has been a journey in my faith as well, that I'm becoming more peaceful with. People would tell me all the time about human trafficking or bad things, like, oh, there's a purpose in it. That, it's almost like God allows human trafficking to happen. And I would just rail, against them, against God. But what I'm doing, what I think God is doing through like a story like Megan's and everyone else's stories I'm listening to, is that I'm having a flip, like that script flipped, is that God is love and he is unable to leave his children. And when horrible things happen, it's God, his spirit of love, that is with you, and the world has left you. And it's transforming my life listening to like a story like Megan, who can come out of this and not be bitter and be thankful. And I think that's why I just was so blown away by this podcast, was her journey to trust and acceptance again. How did you have this pain? And then what was the process for you then to get a vision? Like, oh, this can be rethreaded into something good. Like, that seems like a very Did it take time? Was it like, what was that process?
Yeah, it took a lot of time. And I think at first it started from anger. When, I found out I was pregnant, like the one thing he wasn't going to take from me was basketball. I was going to finish out the season. Even if I never got to play again, that was the one thing I was going to do, finish out the season. So I did. I finished out the season 5 months pregnant and hadn't gained any weight. So it wasn't a big deal, but I still had, 3 a.m., 4 a.m. workouts because it was a community college and they don't have any rules over there. So you can practice whenever they felt like it. And so I wasn't going to let him take that. And then it was, I'm going to get my degree. You're not going to steal that part of me too. And so whatever I needed to do to get my degree, that was going to happen. And eventually it became a beautiful story that I didn't write. I feel like I was just privy to be a part of it. God was writing something beautiful with all of it. And whether it was using my parents or, a friend at the time or just a good text message from somebody. At one point, I was pretty depressed going through all of this. And, there's no coping mechanism that helps you with that at all. And one night I was pretty low. And I remember vividly this random person that I knew from years before text me. I was like, hey, do you want to hang out tomorrow? And it was the night I was planning, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I was pregnant and I was like, there's no way I can get up tomorrow. This is it. Like, I'm going to do something tonight. Got that text message, a reason to get up the next day. And I look back and I see all these little pieces, like it's almost like breadcrumbs that God left for me. And these people that were random and it wasn't that the person themselves was important. It's that the fact that they took the time to reach out, not knowing what I was going through, not knowing anything. And so I've tried to take that into now. If somebody pops in my head or I have a dream about somebody, I always reach out just because you never know. You never know what somebody's going through. You never know what they're dealing with. And if it might just be a text message that says, hey, I'm thinking about you, you're in somebody's mind, that could change their day. It doesn't have to
save
be
their life. I know. And it always comes down to time, right? That you can't rush the healing. I just sometimes in my life, I would have this expectation that like, I'm just going to be real vulnerable with my faith that, everyone's just like, well, just pray and God for forgiveness, ask to forgive the person that I didn't want to forgive. And I would pray the prayer. And so then I just expected like everything to change in my life instead of actually having the courage to like really walk through the hard things and maintain relationship and really, really deal with the deep hurt in my life. And I think that's why I was so struck by Megan's story is that over time and all these tiny little things, her heart was restored. And not just restored, like restored and more, like restored and reaching your potential. It just gives me faith to take time. Have you had a first full circle moment where you felt it had been, not that the rethreading process ever ends, but you had felt something had been rethreaded?
Yes, I've had a few of those. The most recent one was I was actually on a call for a speaker. I'm on a panel coming up, and all the women that are on this panel are all female business owners. We're all founders, and all of us were teen pregnancies, different ways, one or another. And
it's fascinating.
Yes, and it just happened last week. And I was just like, wow. Wow, like none of us were supposed to make it this far. And so I'm always reminded, my parents told me, you weren't supposed to be a statistic. How did this happen, right? And so statistically improbable that what happened to me, but then more statistically improbable that all these women are killing it in business after all this happened. And I just thought that was such an incredible moment of what a great group to be a part of.
There's something about, right, when we find out we're not alone. And I think that blame and shame tells us that we're alone, that, you're a teenage mom, the expectation is you're not going to amount to anything. And then what a blame and shame. I mean, that is how community moves you out of blame and shame, right? All these women, teenage pregnancies, and they experienced a lot of judgment for it. I actually was at the panel that day, and all of them defied the odds, right? And we talk about moving out of blame and shame with imagination, courage, and empathy. And yeah, I saw in that moment how community, knowing you're not alone in it, can move you forward into into your potential. So all those women, what was meant to be this hardship, she talked about how her son gave her focus. It helped her. She ended up meeting the man she was going to marry who had kids. She never wanted kids. And like how this child at a young age, out of this circumstance that she went through, was used for good and actually made her the woman she is today. It's incredible.
Failure is not getting back, is when you refuse to get back up. Like getting knocked down makes you stronger. And I know for a fact that had I not dealt with everything I've dealt with up to this point, that I wouldn't be resilient in business. I wouldn't be resilient in other aspects of my life. And honestly, if I hadn't had a kid, I probably wouldn't have married my husband because he had 4 kids. Like, kind of crazy person with no kids marries a man with 4 kids. And so it really is this like weird way of working out, but it's because God's protective umbrella is just hanging over you when you're with him, you know? And I really feel like where things go wrong for me is when I step outside of that protection and I make my own decisions and I say, no, I have it. That's when everything starts going wrong. Not that you can't get wet under that umbrella, but it's definitely wet for a reason under there. More like Job and less like Judas.
So, gosh, this is the quote. I mean, I made the same noise right now that I did in the video where she said, I have to play it again. Failure is when you refuse to get back up. Failure is when you refuse to get back up. That it's totally okay to get knocked down, but actual failure is when you don't get back up. I love that because I feel like I spend a lot of my life getting knocked down and getting back up over and over again. And it's a constant getting back up, getting back up. And I'm having this memory. It was my birthday and I had a big party planned. I was in my 40s somehow. I had this amazing group of friends and I was that morning, it was Saturday morning, I went on a bike ride with my friend Jared and we had a really bad bike accident. I mean, I hit my head. I was covered in scrapes. I mean, it was traumatic and we canceled my birthday that night. And so then we had it a couple weeks later and my friends were kind of speaking life over to me. And one of my friends, Kata, says to me, you know what, Kristen? She goes, my favorite thing about you is that you get back on the bike. And she goes, most people would quit after an accident like that. And she goes, and you got back on the bike. So I think, again, the power of community to have someone see you and encourage you to get back on the bike. Just because you fell, it's not failure. I love it.
I had gotten so dark and deep down this rabbit hole with this man that had drugged me down to the pits of hell is what it felt like. Mm-hmm. And, just stepping up out into the light of, being loved by my family, being loved by other people. Like it was a long process and I didn't recognize myself for a long time. And I don't even know that there was a day where I looked and I was like, oh, there you are. I think it's just you look back and you're like, oh, I found myself at some point along the way and God grabbed me up by both wrists and just drug me the rest of the way out of that hole at some points.
I think that hard things are hard, right? And we all find ways to avoid hard things. I mean, I feel very, very aware of it in my life these days about how scrolling on my phone is really a coping mechanism to not feel lonely, to not feel anxiety. And I know we all have that coping mechanism, right? Stop us from feeling the hard things. And this also a reminder that there is this grace, right? That it's going to take time, it's going to hurt, and there's grace for the moment. That you are growing, you are healing, you're getting better, and sometimes you don't even realize you're doing it. Because I can look back, my healing has felt slow in my life, but I can look back 5 years from now and I'm like, oh wow, I've grown a lot. Grace. Most of us want to rush the healing process because it hurts. What I hear over and over again is that it is the tiniest things, like almost on like a daily basis. This tiny thing this day, this tiny thing this day, this tiny thing this day. And over time, those tiny things bring healing.
They do. And I don't think you notice when you're healed. I don't think most people know when they're making history. It's not until it's over and you look back, you're like, oh wow, I did that. Like that's God did that. Somebody else did that. Like you don't realize it when you're in the middle of it. And it really is the small things. We all want the big, a sexy project, right?
Yeah.
Because they're fun and they're shiny. But the day-to-day grind of most of this is where you find yourself learning the most, growing the most, healing the most. And whether it's business, whether it's healing from something bad that happened, it's the choosing to get up some days is enough.
Today was my 13th anniversary at Rethreaded. So I've been doing this 13 years. And I love the big sexy events. Like I loved when we got to do Beyond Project Runway. And I love our big parties. And I love the dopamine. Why Rethreaded has been successful is everyone that's involved with it over and over again is choosing the little tiny things over and over again. To have the tiny hard conversation, to give the word of encouragement, to make the hard choice when you don't feel like filling out the spreadsheet, from cleaning the bathrooms for the 5th time that week, right? It's these little things over and over again, the stuff that's not in front of people. It's continually, I'm thinking of how much over the 13 years, people have just continually steadily loved me over and over again. That when I also wanted to quit, when I also didn't think I could go on, it was a steady drip of love, of encouragement. And I've been having these moments at Rethreaded lately where I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm so thankful to be here. So deeply thankful to be here and be able to witness this, to be in awe of what 13 years of pouring your life into over and over and over again, what it built, and the community that it has built, the healing that it's bringing. I'm really proud of our team. She has such a deep sense of her purpose that's not connected to, I feel like she's learned is not connected to her circumstances. A rapist could not steal her purpose. The shame of judgment from other people could not steal her purpose. And it was the love of family, her faith in God, that helped slowly over time recreate the vision for her life, gave her a vision for her son. And I encourage you to listen to this entire podcast. There are so many good moments. These are just a couple of the moments. And it's funny for me to watch these clips back with you because I'm having the same reaction that I had in the moment again and again. So go listen to this. When you're on a long drive, when you're on your walk, I just feel like there is something in this podcast for you that will encourage you, that will challenge you, that will affirm you, that will allow you to be seen. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for your support of Rethreaded. Subscribe, and please go shop Rethreaded. Thank you all so much.